In the BLS 2025 annual CPI review, all items inflation was 7%. That number is not a rumor, and it is not meant to describe one household. It is an index. But a household does not pay an index. A household pays rent or shelter costs, electricity, food, gasoline, and the rest of its monthly obligations. So the puzzle is not simply, why is inflation high? The cleaner question is this: why can inflation look modest in the official data while the household experience still feels severe? The answer begins with a distinction. The CPI is a serious statistical instrument. It matters for policy, contracts, markets, and Social Security cost of living adjustments. But the CPI is not a biography of your budget. It is an average basket. You do not live inside the average basket. You live inside your own shelter cost, your own grocery list, your own utility bill, your own commute, and your own leftover cash at the end of the month. That is the hidden math of your personal CPI. At the center of inflation measurement is a weighted average. A price change matters only as much as the weight attached to that item. If food rises, it moves the index by the food weight. If shelter rises and shelter carries a larger weight, it moves the index more. Conceptually, the calculation is simple. Take each spending weight, multiply it by that category's price change, and add the pieces together. That is the official inflation number in miniature. The official version uses spending patterns for a broad, urban population. BLS says CPIU covers more than 90% of the U.S. population, which is exactly why it is useful as a national measure. But usefulness at the national level creates a limitation at the household level. A broad average does not tell us what happened to one specific budget. If your rent weight, utilities weight, or food weight is larger than the average basket, then your personal inflation can move away from the headline number. Now, imagine 4 households. One is a renter, and shelter dominates the monthly budget. One drives long distances to work, so fuel, insurance, and repairs matter more. One has children, so food, school costs, child care, and medical expenses become more visible. Another household earns more and spends a larger share on travel, services, electronics, and discretionary categories. The same economy touches all 4 households, but it does not touch all 4 budgets with the same weights. This is why one inflation number can feel emotionally wrong without being statistically wrong. The official number answers one question: what happened to the average market basket? The household is asking a different question: what happened to the bills I cannot easily avoid? Those are related questions, but they are not the same question. The 2025 data show the paradox clearly. In the BLS annual review, CPI all items rose 7% from December 2024 to December 2025. But the components did not move together. Food rose 3.1%, shelter rose 3.2%, electricity rose 6.7%, utility gas service rose 10.8%, hospital and related services rose 6.7%, and at the same time, gasoline fell 3.4%. That negative bar is important. A fair explanation has to include the offsets. The headline number is not built by selecting only the painful categories. It is built from many categories moving at once, some up sharply, some up modestly, and some down. But the human experience is not an equally calm average of every line item. It is weighted toward bills that arrive every month and bills that cannot easily be delayed. Rent, food, electricity, insurance, and medical costs occupy more attention because they occupy more constraint. Now, let us build a simple personal CPI model. This is not a national estimate. It is a transparent household calculation. Suppose a household brings in $3,000 per month. Before the price changes, it spends $1,150 on rent, using shelter as the CPI proxy, $500 on food, $100 on electricity, $60 on utility gas, $120 on medical care, $150 on motor vehicle insurance, $160 on gasoline, and $410 on other fixed essentials. That is $2,650 of spending, leaving $350 of monthly margin. Now apply the selected 2025 category changes. Shelter at 3. 2% adds $36.80. Food at 3. 1% adds $15.50. Electricity at 6. 7% adds $6.70. Utility gas at 10. 8% adds $6.48. Medical care at 3. 2% adds $3.84. Motor vehicle insurance at 2. 8% adds $4.20. Gasoline fell 4%, so it subtracts $5.44. And to avoid exaggerating the case, assume every other fixed essential is flat. The total increase is $68.08. On a $2,650 spending base, that is about 2.6% personal inflation. Up to this point, the math is not dramatic. It is close to the headline CPI number. The more important step is the denominator we choose next. This is where inflation starts to feel larger than the headline. The $68 increase is 2.27% of income. It is 2.57% of spending. But the household does not experience every dollar of income as available breathing room. Much of the income is already assigned to non-negotiable bills. Before the price change, the remaining margin was $350. After the price change, the margin falls to $281.92. So the household did not lose 6% of its breathing room. It lost $68 out of $350 of breathing room. That is 19.45%. This is the core equation. Official inflation is a price index problem. Household stress is a margin problem. A 3% inflation environment can feel much closer to 20% when the increase lands on a small leftover margin. The pain is not measured only by the rise in prices, it is also measured by how much of the buffer disappears. The difference is not only a hypothetical budget exercise. BLS also publishes research CPI series by income quintile to study inflation across the income distribution. BLS is careful about the limits of those series. They are research indexes, not the official CPIU, and they do not capture every difference in stores, brands, neighborhoods, rental units, or product choices. Still, the pattern is useful. Research summarized by the Minneapolis Federal Reserve found that since 2005, prices in the baskets of the lowest income households rose more than prices in the baskets of the highest income households. Cleveland Federal Reserve work later cited the full BLSR CPII series through December 2024. Cumulative inflation was about 6% for the bottom quintile and 57.5% for the top quintile. That is not a hidden 100% gap. It is a persistent gap. Persistence matters because small annual differences compound across rent, food, utilities, and transportation. There is also a balancing fact. Cleveland Federal Reserve researchers found that bottom income and bottom wage groups experienced both higher inflation and higher wage growth after the post-pandemic inflation peak. Some purchasing power recovered, so the honest version is not that every lower-income household was affected by the same amount. The honest version is that different baskets, different wages, and different margins create different inflation experiences. There is one more source of confusion. Disinflation is not deflation. Falling inflation does not automatically mean falling prices. If inflation drops from 7% to 3%, prices are still rising. They are just rising more slowly. In mathematical language, inflation is the slope of the price level curve. The price level is the height of the curve. When the slope gets smaller, the height does not fall by itself. That is why someone can hear that inflation is down and still feel little relief at the grocery store. The previous price increases remain embedded in the level. Unless prices actually fall or incomes rise enough to catch up, the household still lives on the new higher base. There is no contradiction in the data. There is a difference between rate of change and level. The CPI is useful because it answers a precise question about average consumer prices. It helps economists compare time periods, policymakers monitor inflation, and markets price expectations. But CPI is not a full affordability index. It does not tell us whether income rose at the same pace. It does not tell us whether rent is high relative to a paycheck. It does not tell us whether debt payments changed or whether a household has a $350 margin or a $3,500 margin. So the precise version of the complaint is not, the CPI is fake. The precise version is this: my basket, my income growth, and my remaining margin do not match the headline number. That is a much better question. It is measurable. It is less emotional. And it is exactly the kind of question that math can clarify. So, the framework is straightforward. Official CPI measures the average change in prices. Personal CPI measures the change in the prices you actually buy. Margin stress measures how much of your remaining buffer disappears. Those are three different numbers. The official annual inflation number can be right for the period it measures, and household frustration can still be real. The CPI is not lying. It is averaging. And the part of the budget that gets squeezed is not always the average basket. It is the small piece left over after the bills are paid. That is the hidden math of your personal CPI. If this kind of math-first finance explanation is useful, subscribe to Quantly for more clear evidence-based breakdowns.